Let's have a look at stated preference methods to value things that are not traded on markets, including environmental goods and services. I'm going to talk about the principles first. I'm going to focus on the contingent valuation methods and finally on the choice modeling methods. This is where we are in the sequence. We are nearing the end of the subsequence on valuation. But let's first look at the principles of stated preference methods. With revealed preference methods, we looked at surrogate markets. With stated preference methods, you look at hypothetical markets. The good thing about hypothetical markets is that they can be about anything. The bad thing about hypothetical markets is that they are not real. The basic idea here is that we infer preferences for environmental goods and services from reports of intended behavior in markets that are created by the analyst. There's two main flavors of stated preference methods. The contingent valuation method is the oldest. Essentially, it is a survey format. There's a direct question from the interviewer to the subject. What would you pay for this particular good or service? Choice modeling methods or choice experiments are based on choices between hypothetical goods with varying attributes, including, of course, attributes that relate to the environment, that's what we're interested in, and their price, because that is how we derive the value. And this is not a survey format, but much more a supermarket format. Would you pay X pounds for good A? Would you pay Y pounds for good B? Or would you rather walk out? And this is what you do in the supermarket. You walk in, you go in with the intention to buy a box of cornflakes. You are confronted with a range of choices: big boxes, small boxes, red boxes, blue boxes, boxes with lots of sugar on the cornflakes and boxes with a lot less sugar on the cornflakes. And of course, they all come at different prices. And then from that range, you either decide to pick one or you decide to go home without cornflakes. So that is a fairly natural situation for people to be in, or rather it's a situation that is familiar to people. Contingent valuation is something else entirely. People are not unfamiliar with it, but the survey is the format is that somebody walks up to you in the street and asks you, would you sign this petition? Or in this particular case, would you contribute £10 to this good cause, right? So that is the big difference between contingent valuation, a voluntary contribution to a cause, versus a choice between alternatives. Choice modeling is popular in transport research and in market research as well, but then comes under the name of conjoint analysis. A good thing about stated preference methods is that they can be about anything. So we can, in principle, estimate the total economic value of an environmental good or service, not just the use values, which we can do with stated preference methods, but also option values, non-use values, intrinsic values, and what have you. Because we're using a hypothetical market, we do not need to make assumptions about what the market is like. We do not need to assume or work around the fact that the market is perfect or not perfect. We do not need to, we're not at the mercy of, say, a real estate agent making data available to us. So that is good. And because we're not using actual markets, we can also use these methods for things that haven't happened yet. Stated preference methods can be used ex ante, including for goods that have not been introduced into the market, and that's where the market research comes in. A company may decide to bring a new kind of toothbrush onto the market and wants to know what people are willing to pay for that toothbrush. You can only use a hypothetical market for that because the toothbrush isn't there, but the same is true for an ex ante evaluation of policy changes that haven't happened yet, or the value of species that still exist but are at the risk of going extinct. And you can, in principle, value the willingness to accept compensation for a particular species going either locally or globally extinct. You can never do that with revealed preference methods because this hasn't happened yet, fortunately. Another thing that you can do with stated preference methods is essentially a survey, so you can ask people all sorts of additional questions. There's a lot of experience with this, which helps, and policymakers tend to appreciate this method because it's comprehensible, because it is in a way very similar to popularity polls that of course politicians look at quite a lot. Stated preferences also have real weaknesses. It is, and we'll talk about this later, it is hard to get it right. And to get it right, it actually becomes very expensive, very time consuming. The main reason why it's hard to get right is because it is not rooted in actual behavior. And people may express an opinion, but they may not be willing to put their money where their mouth is. And the actual design of the study can introduce all sorts of biases. So on the one hand, it's a great set of methods. On the other hand, there are real problems with this. And as I said, the main issue here is the fact that it's all hypothetical, and there's free leaps that you make from real behavior. What you want to know is people's actual behavior in a real market, but the market isn't there yet, or the market isn't there. So what you measure really is intended behavior in the real market, but that's not quite true either, because the market isn't real. So really what you're measuring is intended behavior in a hypothetical market, but that is also not true, because you're actually not looking at intended behavior, you're looking at what people say their intended behavior is. So there's three leaps of faith here: that the reports of the intended behavior is accurate, that is, what people say they intend to do is what they intend to do. Then what they intend to do, should this market exist, is what they would do if this market does exist. And then the third leap of faith is that what people intend to do equals what they actually do. And that is the main weakness, set of weaknesses of the stated preference methods. But it is big stuff. It is a central part of environmental economics research, and not just research, it's also a central part of a lot of policy making that is going on around the world, as well as what is going on in the courts in order to determine compensation and fines that are placed on polluters.